Brace yourself.
Spooky time that we experience every year is fast approaching, so we're quickly seeing game companies launch their trademark horror games. The genre continues to have its ups and downs, but the core philosophy of fear perseveres every year, and we're given new scares to share every October. This year is already shaping up to have some gems in Frictional's Soma and Koei Tecmo's Fatal Frame 5, but a dark horse for the horror scene came to us earlier this year in Supermassive Games Until Dawn, which launched on the PS4 in August. It's not easy to stand out in the horror genre thanks to a numb AAA market and cookie-cutter jumpscare simulators on the indie side. But Until Dawn takes a number of intelligent steps to capturing fear in its most concentrated form, disorienting the player and defusing their own human qualities. As I've said before, fear is our biological instinct kicking in. It's where our human quality of logic is dispelled and we're left in a state of confusion. Understanding is our defense against fear, as when you understand something, you're not as likely to fear it. Whether it's the potential for a tremendous fall off a ledge or a lack of assurance of what hides in the dark, fear is where our logic and, as a result, our control is taken away. When that control is taken away, we're left in an off-kilter mental state, the perfect opportunity to be scared. Making a horror game that also gives the player a command over the world is extremely difficult to do, because control and agency give the player confidence. When a player is in full command over how things operate, the opportunities to disorient and frighten are fewer. Until Dawn gives the player control over how the story progresses, offering multiple choices and quick-time events which can change the course of the story entirely. Having a character respond a certain way to a question, take a particular path instead of another, or decide to nail a quick-time event in time or not at all are routine instances where the player can impact how the story plays out. But giving a player so much control in a horror game sounds like a bad idea, because control makes the player feel safe, at ease, and well-equipped for what's ahead. In that regard, Until Dawn, at least in theory, would be a terrible horror game because the elements that produce fear, a lack of logic and control, are not as prevalent as a game where the world is totally out of the player's command. But Until Dawn isn't a terrible horror game. It manages to subvert that player command not by removing that agency, but bathing it in ambiguity.
Boom. Butterfly effect.
Sure, the player does have the ability to impact the story to their liking. They can kill a character off if they do so please. They can make one of the residents react in an off-putting or even out-of-character way. But the ability to make decisions ultimately doesn't produce any logic or understanding if the results are not known. This is why games like The Walking Dead are prime examples of player choice and some of the best representations of interactivity ever seen in games. They give you a choice, but thanks to clear ambiguity, you're guided by your own interpretations of the morality instead of the morality itself. Look at a game like Infamous, which clearly gives you a good or evil option. Really, that makes the scene purely judged on the game's interpretation of the situation and not the player's interpretation. Until Dawn doesn't offer any real insight to a decision's result until after you've made it, so you're forced to use your own personal interpretation of what could happen should you make a choice. The results can end up being straightforward or even contradictory, and this gets even more complex when decisions you made chapters ago finally start to show their consequences. That first playthrough of Until Dawn is a cavalcade of what-ifs, and with all those questions in the air, being able to decide what happens doesn't mean as much anymore. But Until Dawn's ambiguous choices aren't the only thing that makes them unsettling and ultimately scary. It's the game's pressure for you to choose them, all while abandoning logic and going with your gut instinct. Until Dawn's decisions routinely occur on a time limit. Some choices require a ticking QuickTime event or demand you make a move on the spot. Supermassive Games don't want you to spend minutes contemplating the potential consequences because that's logical. Using the information you've gathered, you can make an estimate on whether your decision is the one that will keep everyone alive or not. The more you think, the more you understand, and the less you fear. Until Dawn counteracts these logical situations by not giving you time to think. You're forced to abandon logic because it takes up too much time, leaving you with gut instinct as your main weapon. Instinct is really the counterpart to logic, the chaos to its order. Neither are inherently good or bad, but instinct is natural, animalistic, and impulsive. The time decisions in Until Dawn only offer enough time to process instinctive weighing of the options as opposed to logical weighing. Without time to think, you're unable to process that logic. It gets dispelled, and you're left with the animal instinct to push you further. Instinct is humankind's last resort when it comes to survival because we're abandoning our defining human element in order to stay alive. Until Dawn taps into that need to think quickly, throwing logic aside and putting us in an off-kilter position without the security of logical thought to guide and protect us. We're forced to think instinctively, and like animals, we're forced to fear the unknown and the pressure time puts on us, so we have no time to tap into our human qualities in order to progress further. Ultimately, Until Dawn's fast pace and nebulous decisions are disarming to us, and our strongest weapon against the unknown, our power of logic, is out of our reach. Until Dawn did the deed of forcing us to abandon logic for the sake of its story, and even when we're given the power to guide the story how we want, that veil is never lifted. Supermassive Games successfully managed to weave a thick narrative web, but never gave us the tools to untangle it. For any other game, that might sound like a misstep, but for a horror game, it's a key tactic. We're constantly tricked into thinking that we can shape the story to our liking, but Supermassive Games use some sleight of hand in Until Dawn, ultimately leaving us more vulnerable than we were when we started. Quite honestly, that's horror in a nutshell, making us feel vulnerable and teaching us to abandon our human logic, one scare at a time. Hello everybody, thank you for watching my video on Until Dawn. If you enjoyed it, remember to like, favorite, comment, subscribe, and share. I'd appreciate any feedback and or spreading of the word that you can provide. There on the screen is the social media information, the Twitter and Facebook, in addition to a link to my previous video, which is on Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. There's also a link to my friend Matt What the Fuck's channel, which is essentially our Let's Play channel, where we play various PC and console games. Thanks again for watching, folks, and have a good one.